welcome to lesson 2. We're going to be using watercolors in this lesson. I'm going to show you a little bit about how to create form and shape using bright and bold colors. And this will give you a very expressive and fun portrait. Okay, so let's get started. I just want to show you what I'm going to be using, which materials. I have a small compact set of watercolors. They're Winsor & Newton watercolors. They're very well used, but I can replace the half pans when I want to. These just come out and I can replace them. So I love my Winsor & Newton. Then I also have another palette which has a couple of Winsor & Newton. This is a very small compact set. And I've replaced some of the Winsor & Newtons with some fluorescent colors from A Case of Making. You can buy them online. They have their website online. And these I use to do this extremely bright portrait. So although these are watercolors, you still get the intensity of a fluorescent color with it. So we may add a few fluorescents in the next portrait that we'll do together. Then another one that I've done, this is all using Winsor & Newton colors. And I'm going to teach you a little bit about the color blocking, and we'll work directly on top of the papers, sketching with the watercolors first. This, just using the 3 colors, the black, the blue and the red, and keeping it very simple. But as you can see, we've blocked in the colors just using shapes and not adding too much detail. I'm using I have a 2, 3, 4, 6 and 8 brush here. I usually just use the 4 because it's a good size for me, but because we're working on a little bit larger scale, I thought an 8 may be great for the larger areas of the portrait. Then I'll show you my inspiration muse that we're going to be using. Let me just put this here. This is Adam Moses, or Adamo Moses. He's on Sketchy, and I chose this photo of him because he has really high contrast. So right here on the forehead, the tip of the nose, the cheeks, a little bit of his neck. Oops, sorry. I took a snapshot just in case my internet went down, which is a good idea. And then he's got all the texture in the beard as well. So, like I said before, we're not going to be using pencil. We're just going to go directly in with watercolors. So I'll leave him here, and this is where we're going to be painting him. So I'm going to take my number 4 brush, and why don't we go straight in with a really bright color that we can go over if we need to. So I'm going to use this set of watercolors first. And yeah, let's go in with a green. Now, usually I would either test these colors, which we can do. I've got a little piece of paper here, just so that you can see the brightness of the color. If I want to water it down, I can either water it down in my color well, or I can take my clean brush and work into the color, bringing out a lighter tone of that color. So that's almost like wet on wet, and this was wet on dry. So again, if I take another color, let's take the other bright fluorescent. If I take it directly from my watercolor palette and put it onto the paper, this is called dry on dry. And then if I want to wet the paper a little bit with just plain water, and then take a little bit of the color and then add it to the wet area, that's wet on wet. And then you can blend actually on the paper as well. So we're going to be using a little bit of both. First, we're going to be using the dry on dry just to create the sketch. I'm going to start with the green. So again, I just make a little mark at the top of the head so I know where his hair is. And then I want the portrait to be around this size, and that's with his beard. So this whole area. And I'm just going to look at the angle at the top of his head. He has a little bit of a tip of his hair there. And just make sure that I'm getting all the angles, which is really important for sketching directly with a color and not in pencil, so we can't erase it. And don't be afraid, you know, if you're not getting paid for a portrait, you're going to do your best, but you shouldn't be worrying or stressed that it's not perfect, because one, you can always do it again, and two, you're the only judge. So I'm just blocking in the shape straight away, and I notice that his eyebrow comes out a little bit, and then this part, the skin around his eye, makes a little mark there. Now his eyebrows are a little bit of an angle, they go up like this, so I just want to mark the other eyebrow to make sure I get that angle. And then he has almost like a frown on him, so I'm going to put those little marks. If you squint your eyes, you can really see those little marks there. And then really, all this is in shadow. So I'm going to leave all that in shadow. There is a fleck of light in his eye, so let's just, it's probably bigger than I need, but I'm just going to leave that there. And all this is dark. We can go in with a darker color to create a little bit more contrast. And see how right here, just by his eye, so I've done that little line, and you can see it's actually not as sharp right here, so why don't we try using the wet on wet. So I'm going to do a line. You can't really see it, but this is just of the clear, just water, and then also come up here. I don't want to touch this area because this is one of the brightest areas. Now you can see it slightly, so I'm going to leave that wet, and then I'm going to take my green and I'm going to go into that mark that I've just put, but this will help me and the line become a soft line rather than a harsh line. Got this line, then his nostril is right here. Then all this down here is really beard. Let's get the hairline over here finished off. And always relate where things are in relation. So the top of the ear, if you sweep across here, is just by the eye. So I'm going to make a little mark there. And the ear is going to come right around here. and it goes down to past his nose. So right here. We're going to mark this in. Now if I was painting in realistic colors, I'd be doing all this in like a red tone. But because we're working with bold colors, I want you to steer away from what colors you see, and really we're just sketching out the portrait with the color that we're using, and then we'll start using some contrasting colors once we've got the sketch of the portrait. Okay, so here's a little bit of hair comes down there, and then his neck. I think his hair is quite flat here, and then a little bit spiky here that goes up into the top. I think I may have made his brow a little short, so we'll correct that in a minute with another color, just so that we can see where I've gone wrong. And I don't concern myself too much because it's quite a light color. We're going to be using other colors as well. So looking at the shape of his beard, I'm just going to bring this around his nostril here. And then his other little nostril there. And then the beard that comes down here. And we have his eye up here, and the other one is literally on the other side of his nose. These are really important, these shapes. So sometimes I'll look, if I'm getting a little bit overwhelmed with making sure that my drawing is right, I'll look at this line here, and I know that it's not a completely straight line, and it hits the top of his brow, and then the next one right here, and then his eye, his iris and eyeball is right there. So we may have to change a little bit the shape under here, but I think we've caught that fine. Okay, and the tip of his nose. Angles can be difficult, but you don't want to make them complicated. Just look and treat each shape either as an individual, so you know this comes down and a little bit around. I think his mustache actually comes up a little bit more. So I'm just going to fill in his beard because we're going to be using other colors to create detail. And this is where I can switch and use my larger paintbrush just to fill in. It goes so much faster. I want to keep a little bit of light here because he does have a lighter color beard there. So let's correct his forehead a little bit because I do think I'm a little off on that. So I'll correct it in green first, and then we're going to be using other colors anyway. Just slightly. And I can even try and blend that in, which is a good tip to know when you're working with watercolors. Although you can't erase, you can soften. So I'll soften that line, And then this is all wrong, should be a lot higher up. I'm going to let that dry a little bit and then I'll come back to that. And let's just draw in his shoulder here and his shoulder here. Okay, so we want to work with a little bit of a darker or a contrasting color. So I really love this bright fluorescent. So let's see how this goes with contrasting against the green. So I'm going to start on the nose because this is where, if you look at all where the reds are or would be, or the pinks on the face, that's where I'm going to add this color. And you'll notice sometimes when I'm working, especially with another color, I will be moving around the page. I won't just stay in one area. So I don't want to completely work over the green because we don't want to lose what we have. So I can really slightly see the top of his eye here. And I'm going to use this for his hair as well. Sorry, sometimes I'll go completely quiet because I'm concentrating so much. Okay, so right here, we're gonna get this forehead right. So I use the green really as a sketching tool. I know it can be a little bit daunting sometimes to know where to put these shapes and bold colors in, but if you experiment, you'll get so much more comfortable with just being bold and courageous. So I'm even, like when I squint, I'm even seeing these big areas within his beard that give his beard shape and form. Not putting too much detail in, I'm just looking at those big blocks of shapes. I know that his lips are under here somewhere, but because you can't see them, I don't really want to draw them in. but we do have this lighter area here that's going to help us give the shape underneath. So when I'm drawing the hair, I'm almost not touching the paper, just to create more of like a wispy, soft feel. I'm still using the same brush. Instead of changing my number 4 and using a smaller brush, I'm just lightening up the pressure of my brush on the paper. I'm going to make right here a little bit darker. There's a really fine line there where his eyelid is, and right over here as well. You can fill all this in. And because you can almost see the little hairs here, the individual hairs, I'm going to try and create a little bit of texture. And always look at the direction the hair is going in. I can create some wispy pieces over here. So I want my brush to be loaded and the watercolor paint to be quite wet on my brush when I'm doing very thin lines. I'm going to block in this area of his nose. And then really go in here with a darker color. This side I'm going to leave completely light. Let's get a little bit more detail on his beard. And then right under here, there's a shadow too, but I'm going to keep it in bright pink. So as you can see, we've used two very bright colors to create this portrait, and I feel it gives just as much expression as a realistic one. If we wanted to, we could take another color, but maybe a little bit more contrasting to the green, and make this our background so that the portrait pops. Make sure you go right up to the colors, but don't make them bleed. Bleeding in watercolors is when two colors mix with each other. You can do it purposely, or it could be an accident. So these colors are dry, so they shouldn't bleed, but when two colors are wet, they will bleed. Let's put a touch of the yellow fluorescent in the brightest areas of the portrait. I'm just going to follow the lines around where the colors are. I hope you'll try using different colors to create your portrait. Now that you can see how easy it is, let's put just a touch of darkness here. So that the eyes set back a little bit. And I could keep going, but I won't do too much more. I'll just go in with the really dark areas here to create some form underneath his beard. And maybe a little bit where his eyebrows are. There we go. Oh, and maybe a slight little line here. by his ear. There we go. Thank you for taking my watercolor lesson. It's been fun working with bold and bright colors. I hope you'll give it a try too.